August 6, 2007. Interview with Tom Kovalicky at the Stanley Museum, which is the former Valley Creek Ranger Station for the Sawtooth Valley. He was the last ranger to live at the headquarters. Interviewer Colette Thomas. So Tom, thanks for joining us. Good. I really would like to start to know where you came from, where you were born, a little bit about your childhood.
Okay, well, I was born in 1935 on Friday the 13th, September, in a town called Passaic, New Jersey.
Oh, that's
And I'm second generation American. My grandma and grandpa came over from Poland and Ukraine and Czechoslovakia.
Okay.
And I went to high school in Clifton, New Jersey, and migrated to the University of Montana in Missoula in 1953 as a freshman in the forestry school.
What brought you west? What really
I think it
sparked your
was
interest?
the desire to be a forester and not really knowing, what a forester was.
Yeah.
Until I saw the movie Red Skies Over Montana.
Oh, okay.
And about the 13 smoke jumpers that died in that fire. And that kind of motivated me to look at the Forest Service, or look at forestry as a career, besides just the hunting, fishing, and trapping thing that everybody thought forestry was all about, or the Forest Service for that matter.
Yeah.
So it was a combination of events that brought me out here to just see what forestry was all about. And luckily I had a mom and a dad who were, really good about getting me out here.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you saw that movie, how old were you?
When I was still in high school. I got out of high school in '53, June of '53, and those guys died in '49, so I probably saw that movie around 1951. I would have been around 16 years old.
What was your idea of being a forester then?
Well, it was something to do with a book I had read by Zane Grey called The Young Forester, where the forest rangers were hired to protect the forest from people who set fires, and from poachers, game poachers, and from timber thieves, and people who were sneaking cattle and sheep onto the government land, so to speak, for free grazing. And that's what I thought forestry would be all about, kind of a forest cop, if you were going to look at it that way.
Was it like a Gray's story? Was it like fiction, or was he a forester himself?
No, it was a fiction story, and it became it's one of his more famous novels. And it's kind of a young person's book. When you're 15, 16, you'll read this book and think, wow, what a great profession that must be.
Yeah. So your idea, would you say it was kind of romanticized from what you actually found out once you came out to Montana?
Yeah. Yeah, the novel or the book has no relationship to the real forestry.
Oh, okay.
There was very few similarities. But the real forestry, of course, was a lot of dedication to the land, and a lot of hard work without the benefits of then the time and a half and double time and hazard pay and all the different advantages we have socially today in the workforce. It wasn't any of that. It was get up at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning and don't eat supper until about 7 and be in bed by 9 and start it all over again,
Yeah.
It was just, you didn't say, well, I'm only been hired for 8 hours. You did what they asked you to do.
Yeah, you're married to your job.
Yeah, and it was, a lot more people were working for the Forest Service when I started than there are today.
Oh, yeah.
On the ground, anyhow, at least at the ground level.
Well, do you think now a lot more people, it's more seasonal, those workers?
No, there's probably less seasonal work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there were more seasonals when I was a kid, or when I first started with the Forest Service. very, very few professionals. A lot of technicians, a lot of people who didn't have degrees, who had good positions inside the Forest Service for the fire end of it, the grazing end of it, the timber end of it. In fact, the rather famous ranger that I worked for on the Powell Ranger District, which was then part of the Lolo National Forest, his name was Bud Moore, and he was a ranger without a degree, a college degree.
Was that uncommon?
Pardon?
Was that uncommon then to not
Yeah, it
be
was.
working there without, in that?
Yeah, well, it was toward the end of the era where, prior to the 50s it was common.
Okay.
After World War II, it was less common.
Yeah.
But Bud had a great career, and he was a legendary type ranger. Everybody wanted to be near Bud and learn things. But he went on to the chief's office in Washington, D.C. and ran the fire program for the Forest Service. In fact, he had the courage and the fortitude and the vision to say, we need to let some of these fires go. The Smoky Bear thing is not doing us a lot of favors right now. So Bud pioneered the prescribed burning, under controlled circumstances. And he finally retired. He's living up in Montana. And he wrote a book about the lock saw. It's called The Lock Saw, about that part of Idaho where the Powell Ranger Station has its headquarters today.
Oh,
But anyhow, Bud was the kind of a guy that inspired you to stay in forestry.
yeah.
And
Did that really change your philosophy from what you learned in Montana in forestry school? And then, reading that book or...
yeah, well, it probably didn't have any, you probably couldn't lay your finger on any single impact that made forestry for me worth pursuing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a combination of events that said, this is what I'd like to do for a living. It's exciting, it was adventuristic, the pay was, not that great, but you had great benefits. You got to be in the mountains. You had the opportunity to work with horses and mules and a lot of characters.
Yeah.
Got to do a lot of fighting fire. Got to, do a lot of airplane stuff. And I went on to become a smoke jumper myself. So.
And when did you start doing that? When did you start?
Well, I did smoke jumping for 1 year in '61. And I had just gotten out of the Army. I got drafted out of college for the start of Vietnam, and so I got back out of the Army, and I never could get into the smoke jumpers because my eyes were bad. I couldn't pass the eye
really?
exam. So I met a nurse, and she got me a eye chart, and I memorized the eye chart in a different. Took my exam and faked it, and I got the minimum requirements for the eyes,
Wow.
So that's how I
really
got
wanted
into
to get
jumping.
involved in that.
Yeah. But because I was already 28 years old when I started jumping, and I jumped for 1 year, and then I got my degree finished up, and I was on my way to Laos to drop cargo for Air America, for the insurgents and the guerrillas, and I was offered a job, full-time career job with the Forest Service in Pinedale, Wyoming.
Oh, so that was your first job with the Forest
Yeah, and
Service?
I bowed out of the going overseas with Air America.
Yeah.
And decided to start my career because I was already, by then I was almost 30 years old. So I started my career with the Forest Service in Pinedale on the Bridger National Forest. And then from there I went to Rock Springs, Wyoming, and worked there. And then I came here as a ranger here in Stanley in 1970.
And what kind of work, when you say, you're working in Wyoming and making that move from Wyoming to Stanley, is it all the same work that you're doing? Is it marking the trees and keeping track of wildlife?
No, not really. See, I was a ranger. By the time I came here, I had already been a ranger in Wyoming. So the work there was mostly, when you're a ranger, the work is mostly administration.
Okay.
You have a work crew, and your staff, and you have summer people, you know, you're the boss, and so you're not doing a lot of hands-on work. You're doing more administration, budgets, people, processes, public relations, and stuff like that.
Yeah. And
So when I came here, it was quite a difference, because I came from Rock Spring, Wyoming, which was then probably a town of about 40,000 people.
Oh. And what was the kind of geography out there?
Oh, it was a high mountain desert,
Okay.
and it was a gorgeous part of the world.
Yeah.
I had the Bridger Wilderness on my ranger district, which I think that wilderness had close to 1,000 lakes on my ranger district. Yeah. It was pretty nice.
Yeah.
Pretty nice. Then I came here, and then I figured, wow, how lucky can I be?
Yeah, this was your
Two great
calling
assignments in
here.
a row. You know?
Wow.
Of course, there was nobody here. I mean, there's no public here.
And what year was this?
That was
Came to Stanley? 70?
1970. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there were 29 people living here year-round. Yeah, most of those were Forest Service people.
Had you heard of Stanley before? Or the Sawtooth?
I had never been here,
Yeah.
but I had heard of it. Yeah, because I had friends who worked here,
Oh, okay.
and you know, so they told me about the area.
Yeah.
Yeah, but,
Mainly friends in forestry work.
yeah,
That's how, yeah, they're out here.
yeah. In fact, one of the guys that I started my career with, J.C.B., his father was the forest supervisor of the Sawtooth National Forest.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Back in probably the late 50s, early 60s.
All right. And when did this become the SNRA? When was it designated as the Sawtooth National Recreation Area?
Well, the date of the act, what was it? August something, 1972.
I'm not sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So 1972. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And did you play a part in that? Those 2 years prior to that, and
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why they sent me here, was to run this ranger station and to make sure that the Park Service didn't get a foothold in with the local residents here. They had sent a man up to woo the area to go park rather than go with the Forest Service.
yeah.
And my job was to offset that effort.
And what did you do to do that? I mean,
Well,
what was-
mostly pass out information to the local
yeah.
and work with
Get them involved
Pardon?
and get the locals involved in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so from 70 to 72, when the act finally passed, my job was mainly hosting a lot of people, like VIP type tours and stuff like that,
Okay.
to show them the area and so
Yeah.
forth. Yeah, then I got transferred to the SNRA.
Oh, so then
I
you were and you went down to catch them.
Went down to catch him, and I was there were two administrators, and they called us superintendent and assistant superintendent. And I was the assistant superintendent for administration, and Gray Reynolds was the superintendent for the SNRA. And we used those titles in order to give the area sort of a special meaning or ambiance. We didn't want, and the legislation did not want it to run this like a ranger district. They wanted the SNRA to be a true recreation area, so we did a lot of different things in terms of changing the wording and terminology that the Forest Service used in
Yeah.
order to make more of a spotlight on us. And
And
so,
that was something you enjoyed working towards, you know, not making it national forest, and you liked that effort. I mean, you felt
yeah,
good work. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, because that's
no,
what I was, really interested in. Is
I thought it was a good move. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And so after, because it was 73. What was your last year at the ranger station here?
I moved out of here in '73.
Okay. And is that when you actually
in the fall
retired
of
from the Forest
73.
Service?
Pardon?
Did you actually retire from the Forest Service at that
Oh,
same
no,
time, or did you continue
we were
work?
still Forest Service.
Okay.
No, there was The only thing we changed was some of the terminology and names, but we were still Forest Service people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what made you move out of this particular building?
Well, I had a new job assignment.
Okay.
And my job assignment and my new office was in Ketchum. So I had to move from here down there.
Yeah, and this was no longer the headquarters here?
No.
Okay.
No.
Oh. So how long were you living in this building?
It would have been 72 to the fall of 73.
Oh.
So I got here in May of 70 and left in September, October of 73. Yeah.
What do you think of your time while you're here? Did you enjoy it, or I know there's some plumbing situations that
this was
quite interesting.
This was a great place to live. I mean, you know, I had it's not there anymore, but the CCC boys had built a hut swimming pool across the
oh, they did?
creek right
Oh.
and it was lined with, I think, Italian tile.
Wow.
And it was a gorgeous thing. It had a bathhouse. And we had to, we filled it in with gravel because you know, that was the height of the hippie revolution in America. And people were camping out, and it was getting more and more dirty and more difficult to fight the crowds, and they would be screaming and drinking, and a lot of drug stuff going on, and needles laying around. You know, it just got to be a tough deal. So we closed it down.
A lot for you guys to clean up after. You
know. Oh
know.
yeah, that's all we had to do.
Yeah.
You know, we weren't worried about going to be a janitor for that.
Right.
So we closed her down, but it was great while it was open because you know I had this personal hot tub right there. We had the horses right out here behind the flat.
Oh, really?
That was a big pasture.
Oh.
And life was good here. It was cold here.
Yeah.
There wasn't very many people, you know.
About how cold did it get in the winter
the first
time?
year I was here, we had a week of 60 below.
Wow. Record low for lower 48 in America, you think?
I suppose.
Yeah,
That's pretty low.
that sounds
pretty low.
Yeah.
And it would warm up to 30 below, 20 below. You know, and then we'd kind of hover around, you know, in the zeros and stuff like that for a while.
Yeah,
you know.
that felt warm to you.
Yeah. And this house was cold. It had an oil furnace in here, and that this whole home is built on it's built on a piece of concrete.
Oh,
So
really?
it's kind
So
of like an icebox.
Yeah, because that's how it feels, and it's really well insulated.
Yeah, it is.
Is that how the CCC and the first forest ranger that lived here, he also built this with the CCC?
I think
is
so.
That Merle Markle, or is
Markle.
it Markle?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and this is the original structure. Is there anything added on to this building?
Yeah.
We can just walk
Well,
around
I think this is the original structure. Yeah.
Oh.
I don't think anything's been added onto it. I think they might have improved things. It looks like maybe they might have done something there, but although the ceiling in that little anteroom is original. That's an original, typical of the 20 era.
Okay. And
So
we're talking about the attachment or the room off of
Well, I
the
was thinking
kitchen.
maybe they added it later, but the more I look at it, I think that was part of the original cabin.
And you were the only one living here at that time?
Yeah.
This whole place?
In this house?
Yeah.
It was my house.
Wow.
Yeah.
The bedroom upstairs, right?
Yeah. I had the bedroom upstairs. This was the master bedroom right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you did a lot of your work out of this building too?
No.
Oh, really?
Where you're sleeping was my office.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because that's what I was always wondering is, like, there's the cabinet in the entry room, and I thought, well, maybe you kept your maps in there?
No, this was just all personal stuff in here.
Wow.
This was not an office. This was a home, a house.
Good size home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and we'll look around, you know, take a walk around, and maybe you'll recognize some of, like you said, and the structure hasn't changed, but I've just been curious with what some of the, you know, like those cabinets, what they were used for. And because I always thought, well, maybe the ranger is doing some of the work out of here, but I guess not.
No.
Okay.
No, in fact, those cabinets you're talking about weren't here.
Oh, really?
No, somebody brought those in with the museum.
Oh, okay. okay. Well, maybe that's where they kept the maps to sell. Once it became a museum, I don't know.
None of the stuff you have in here today, including that stove is not there.
Yeah, that was, I think,
I have
a
an
donation.
electric stove there.
Oh. And so it's not as rustic as we make it out to be. Well, it was built in 1933, right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But before that, there was a smaller cabin here. Because I've heard that was moved out to where Danner cabins are now.
That was the office.
Okay.
But it wasn't here. It was over there where the highway shed is, somewhere over there. You know where the Chamber of Commerce office is?
Yeah.
I think it was over there somewhere.
Oh, okay.
And then they moved it to, Danner's bought it, and when the government put it up surplus, then they moved it over to Danner's log cabin motel or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and before we go around, I did want to have you share your story about the plumbing, and it's the one story I've heard so far from you.
Well,
Didn't sound like
the
a
toilet,
situation.
you were talking about the toilet
Yeah.
thing, yeah. I didn't realize it, but for the first year, it never really dawned on me that when you flushed the toilet here in this house, it went into Salmon River.
Just straight to it.
And straight through. And
Wow.
then when, 2 years later down the road, I discovered that. And and that's one reason why I told my boss that when I moved out of this house, we're not going to let anybody else live here anymore.
Yeah. Huh. And it,
Go ahead.
well, who was, nobody was surveying that or keeping an eye on updating this building or the plumbing, or it was just always that way, you think? Wow.
Must have been because nobody seemed to think otherwise.
Yeah.
And they decided that they would not fix it because we had built all the new houses up on the hill where the new office is.
Yeah.
And if I had stayed here, I would have moved out of here
Yeah.
up to one of the new houses on the hill and would have closed this down.
Oh, okay.
Well, we did close it down. This was empty for, I don't know, probably 5, 6, 7 years before the Interpretive Association took it over and started making noises about having a museum here.
Yeah. Well, it's still on Forest Service land?
Oh,
Or is it donation?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, all this belongs to the Forest Service. Yep.
So much I didn't know about the building. It would have been nice to talk with you at the beginning of the summer. So yeah, we'll just go look around and
Okay.
we'll turn this off.
And that's the original kitchen stuff. That's all. That was here then.
Oh. And you had the Forest Service dining ware? You
No,
had that?
no.
Oh, you didn't?
No, you brought your own stuff here.
Oh, okay.
You moved here with your own furniture.
Oh.
This house was not furnished.
Because the other Rangers had their families live here with them, didn't they?
Yeah, well, but the government never gave you furniture.
Huh.
You moved into this house, like if you were renting a house in Chicago, and you brought your own furniture with you.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. Wow.
Yeah.
And then what we have in here now is kind of become our media room.
Yeah, I see that, yeah.
But this was the master bedroom.
This was the master bedroom, yeah. Yeah.
And those weren't built into the wall, that... Because that I always was curious what these shelving in the wall was for, but...
Well, that was there. That was where the heat came from the furnace. The furnace room was right next door, and that's how the heat came out.
Oh, okay. Did you have any of the old stoves in here?
No.
No?
None of that stuff was here.
It's a lot more updated?
There was the only wood burning stove we had was the fireplace.
Oh.
And this was that was just your back porch where you had your washer and dryer.
Oh, yeah.
And then this was the dining room right here.
Oh. Oh, interesting.
And this was the furnace room.
Yeah? Still
Still
used
here.
for that, yep.
Yep.
Well, because the beginning of the summer, it still is pretty cold in here.
Oh, it's always, this house is always cold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one display that we were working on, and the two top shelves, they kept falling off, but this was
Yeah,
a
look at
uniform
that.
that was donated. Keith Ray. Does that sound familiar? Keith Ray is the name on the tag in there.
No, I don't think I know that name.
Okay. And you had your use books or any
Yeah,
of the
well, that was
literature
out of date.
Yeah. Yeah, that was dated in 1907, so I guess before your time.
No, none of that stuff was being used by us. And this is pretty accurate about what it looks like here
About how high is that?
in the wintertime. Yeah, that's pretty high. That's a lot of snow.
Yeah.
I don't know where that is.
That, I believe it's out where Galena Lodge is now. Around that area. But, I mean, I couldn't imagine someone actually lived there when it snowed like that. Didn't you try to keep up with it, keep up with the snowfall and, you know, have a path to the door?
I've never seen that picture before, but that's amazing, that picture.
About how high did the snow get? Just even in the 70s.
At Banner Summit, in like every May, we'd go up there and take a look at the snow.
Yeah.
And it'd be 12, 13 feet.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now it gets, maybe 4 feet? Does it get more than that in this area?
You're in a snow shadow right here, so you get less snow right here in Stanley. But as you go out of town that way, you get more and more. It's probably still around 10, 12 feet up there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And this large room with the fireplace, is this like the living room?
This was the living room, yeah.
Did you entertain a lot of people in here?
Yeah, we had a lot of parties here. Yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
No, this was your primary source of heat, other than there was a barrel or there was a stove, an oil stove where you filled it up with oil.
Yeah, that's what
and
you're
it gave
saying.
you a little bit more heat. And I can't remember exactly where that thing sat. It had to have an outlet. So I don't know if they covered it over. I think it was here in the. I think the oil stove was right here in the dining room.
Oh. Yeah. When was the last time you were in this building?
When the last time?
Yeah.
Oh, last summer.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Probably visit. Yeah. You have. Let's see. I think the upstairs. We've been trying to keep the mice out. And
Well, we had a lot of bats living up there.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. You'd hear a lot of screaming at night when you had guests up there, because the bats would be flying around.
Well, and like we were saying, it was so well insulated. Did it keep the heat in the wintertime? Like, was it comfortable in here?
Well, the floor was always ice cold.
Ah.
I don't care how hot you got the air here.
Yeah.
The floor was always cold.
You kept your shoes on?
What's that?
You just kept your boots on?
Well, you had big slippers anyhow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I burned a lot of wood, I know that. I had that fireplace burning a lot.
Yeah. And you cut your own?
Yeah.
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 Well, everyone still seems to do that in town here.
Oh yeah, that's pretty much the the drill.
Yeah. So this front room in the entryway, what was this area used for?
This was let's see, what did I use it for? I used it mainly for furniture. I had a sitting couch in here against that, where the bookcase is there. And it was kind of like an anteroom where you could come in and shake the snow off of your coat. And there was a big coat rack I had over there, and it was just another extra room, because that was the dining room, and this was just a place for people to walk in and kind of like what they call a mud room.
Yeah.
You know, come in and get rid of your boots and everything before you went into the living room.
Yeah. And this ice house, I've been curious about that. And that, I mean, even right now, it's really cold. It's very well insulated, but
that was, we didn't use that.
Okay.
That was long abandoned.
But it was used as an ice house before?
That's what they tell me, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but we just used it for storage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a really good sized place, so I thought, maybe the former rangers in this area, or maybe even the CCC, use that to store their
they used
game?
it, but it
and
would have been
for
back in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
And, well, maybe even the 40s, but by the 50s, they had, modern refrigerators.
Yeah.
After World War II, everybody had a refrigerator of some type.
Mhm. Yeah, like your washer and dryer, those were electric, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Washer and dryer were pretty
Yeah, this
important.
wasn't too long ago we're talking about. And we were talking the other day, you said that there are still a couple rangers that also lived here.
Yeah, Harold
still alive.
Watley is one of the rangers who lived here. He lives in St. Mary's, Idaho.
Oh.
And then there was a ranger that I replaced. His name is Lee Presley. And he lives over at Kings Hill.
In Idaho? Never heard of Kings Hill.
It's over there between Mountain Home and the Burley area.
Yeah,
Burley.
okay. Yeah.
Okay. And there's the son of one of the rangers living in Haley, Frank Rowland, who worked for me when I was here as an interpretive specialist for the Forest Service when we built Redfish Lake Visitor Center.
Oh.
He had a lot to do with the design of that and so forth. And Jay Seavey, who lives in Haley,
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
his dad is was the fourth supervisor in Twin,
Okay.
and he lived here for a while in this house.
And Jay was your friend that actually told you about this area?
Yeah,
Is that-
he was,
okay.
because I started my career with Jay, yeah.
Yeah.
And his brother Bobby lives here in Stanley. He's
Oh.
a retired outfitter.
Oh, okay.
A whitewater outfitter,
Oh.
CV outfitters.
Yeah, that's probably where I recognize the name, and I think there's some CVs on those napkin rings
I think
too.
there is, yeah.
Yeah.
There is, yeah.
So when did you retire from the SNRA?
No, I took a transfer up to Missoula.
Oh, okay.
I went to another job with the Forest Service in what they call Region 1, which was it was the Regional Forester's office in Missoula. And I worked there for 5 years, and then I took a job transfer to Kalispell, Montana, and I was the Deputy Forest Supervisor on the Flathead National Forest. And then I took a transfer and a promotion to Grangeville, Idaho, which I then became the Forest Supervisor of the Nez Perce National Forest.
Oh, and what does that cover? How much? That's
Well, the
pretty
Nez
large.
Perce was a pretty big forest. It
Yeah.
was about 2.3 million acres, and it covered everything between the Clearwater River and the Snake River and the Salmon River.
Oh. So you worked
Wapsaw
with the
River.
Nez Perce when you were the supervisor
The
there?
Indians?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they were allies. Yeah,
Huh.
yeah, you bet.
What were
They
your
were
goals
allies.
there together? You know, what were you working for?
Mostly the return and recovery of habitat for Chinook salmon.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And also they had treaty rights that
Yeah.
we work with all the time in regards to the harvesting of game and trees and stuff like that. They had treaty rights.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
they
you're the
were-
liaison with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were great people to work with. They still are. Yeah, have a lot
Still
of
involved in
Nez Perce
that?
friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're great people.
Huh. So how did the efforts with trying to preserving the
It
salmon?
went good.
Oh, good.
Oh, yeah.
Because I know that salmon are really depleting out in this area.
Yeah,
So it's
well,
just
the
something-
reason we're not having any luck with our fish coming back is that there are 4 dams on the lower Snake River that were built for no reasons whatsoever other than just making work.
Yeah.
And when they designed them wrong, and they're killing all the baby fish going to the ocean.
Yeah.
And we desperately need to get rid of those 4 dams so that we can have a natural river, and those fish will come back probably by the millions.
Yeah.
But we're not having much luck with that because it's a political thing.
And is it the same Chinook that go through that Grangeville, through that area,
Yeah,
that are migrating out here?
Yeah, they come
Yeah.
right past Grangeville to get here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So were they ever on the endangered species list?
Oh yeah.
When do you know when?
probably back in the mid-'70s.
Okay.
Late 70s.
Oh, are they still on it? Do you know?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, they're still on it.
Yeah. I know a lot of people ask about the fishing in this area, and they think, you hear the name redfish, so they just think this is just going to have an abundance of salmon out here to catch.
What you need to do is, you guys should get a hold of Idaho Rivers United.
Oh yeah, right.
Amanda Peacher, you know her?
No.
Well,
I don't know her.
she'll
I'm just
help you
familiar with
set
the
up a display
organization.
here that will
okay.
talk about the life cycle of the salmon.
Yeah, I'd really like to do that, because we'll send people out to the fish hatchery, and and they have some salmon information out at the Redfish Visitor Center, but I really think people are curious about that. You know?
I think they should. I think you ought to have a display here.
Yeah, it'd really be good.
It's an important aspect of this part of Idaho.
It is, yeah. Because I've heard that, like redfish, how it got its name, it just used to, the lake would literally look red, because there'd be so many salmon in it.
That was a sockeye salmon.
Oh, okay.
The Chinooks didn't go to Redfish Lake; they stayed in the river. But the Sockeyes, that was their home. So their home was also in Stanley Lake, Pettit Lake, and Alturas Lake, and Yellow Belly Lake. But the Fish and Game Department back in those days didn't quite understand what they were doing, so they built dams across all of the lake except redfish, and that stopped the redfish or the sockeye from spawning, and they killed off a huge amount of those fish.
Wow.
So Redfish Lake is the only last hope.
And Idaho Rivers United, that's a non-profit organization?
Yeah, it's a non-profit, the activist organization. Yeah.
How long have you been involved with that?
I've been on the board for about 8 years now.
Oh, okay. Are you involved in a lot of other organizations like that, environmental organizations that are working to preserve the Sawtooth area?
Off and on you come and go with those things, but I've been involved in the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and Trout Unlimited and a whole host of other organizations that are devoted to the land, taking care of the land. Yeah, I've been pretty active in a lot of that stuff.
Well, do you think that's what is really important in this area, that local activism and
it's important, but you don't have a lot of people to work with here who are year-round residents.
Oh, right.
You have some supporters, of course, but you don't have that large population that you can work with on a day-to-day basis and then have them champion the cause politically. They're here for a month or two and then they're gone. It's really tough to work with people in this area. Yeah. Because of the seasonal nature.
Well, and they love this area. So many people want to see it stay the same, and everyone says, "Oh, look how it hasn't changed since I was last visiting in 30 years ago."
All these lands around here are zoned by the Sawtooth National Recreation Area. They all have scenic easements on all this private property. Yeah. They can't subdivide anymore. What you see is what you got.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's good news then.
This area won't change unless something sleazy happens with the politicians who try to downgrade this area
and get roads into here and Is it do you think it is one of the largest roadless areas? In terms of not national forest, because it's not designated that, but I don't know. I've just heard.
It's a huge area with a lot of unroaded country in it. Yeah. Of course, you can't build roads in the Frank Church Wilderness. You can't build roads in the Sawtooth Wilderness. You can't build roads in the White Cloud, even though it's not legislated to be wilderness yet. Oh. But you can't build roads in there. Yeah. Because the forest planning process won't allow it. But you have a lot of land here that could be roaded that is being protected by the Sawtooth National Recreation Area Management Plan, which prohibits development.
Oh, okay. Well, and what did bring you back to Stanley? You said you're in Grangeville, and you're obviously called out to this area, Seems like this is your home.
Oh, yeah. Sure, yeah. This, it's always easy to come back here to Stanley, Idaho. Yeah. Well, Grangeville's just a place where I could store some stuff and come back here.
But are you a year-round resident then?
Here?
Yeah.
No, not year-round. Probably 7 months out of the year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. You're not just passing through the summer.
No.
Yeah.
No, we're hanging out here. That needs to be captured without, I suppose, specific questions that you think history might want to know at some point in time.
Right.
Otherwise, you don't really know where to start and stop.
Yeah.
Life goes on, and people remember, and people forget what this era was like. Your generation has no idea what my era is like, and I have no idea what the era was like by the men and women who lived here in the 40s.
Yeah.
I would have no clue as to what they went through.
Do you think that is something special about this area, since it hasn't been as developed as so many other areas in America?
Well, there's no reason to develop here. There's nothing here to develop.
Yeah.
It's a recreation area. It was a cow area, a sheep area. It never grew big trees, so they never really came here to look for logging. They had a lot of recreation interest, but it's remote. You're out here in the middle of nowhere, and people will come here during the nice part of the year, but they're not going to come here when it's nasty.
Yeah.
So this area was just kind of, I think, destined just to be left alone. A part of Idaho that will always be what it used to be like.
And you think there's a good chance that it'll continue to stay the same? That there won't be the airport or any...
Yeah, I have no doubt that it'll stay.
Oh, good. Well, that's good to hear. Yeah.
But yeah, if the walls could talk, I'm sure you'd hear a lot of stories, But there are, I spent many happy days here, and I know that the people who were here before me always talk about fondly of living here, growing up here. The thing that was tough on the families was they didn't have any high school here.
Yeah.
So the kids had to leave.
Yeah.
And
you go through 8th grade in their one-room classroom in Stanley, and
they had kindergarten through 8th grade here, but they never had a high school.
Yeah.
So that made it tough on the families. They would have to either get a transfer or farm their kids out for the winter, so they could go to high school.
And they go to high school in Chalice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or Haley.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That was something I was just thinking about, what I've only spent just a few months in this location, but the wildlife in this area is just something I'm not used to, and it seemed like we have some bald eagles just nesting in the hills right behind us, and then the elk, they were coming down off that hill every evening until about a month ago.
No kidding.
Yeah. Did you see that same thing? Did the elk come down to the creek?
The elk you have today are here because a lot of the cattle grazing was stopped. But when I was here, this was poor elk here. We did not have elk like you have today.
Really?
Yeah. There was too much cow grazing and too much sheep grazing going on.
Oh.
And the domestic livestock ate up all the forage that elk would normally use during the winter months. It just didn't exist. So the elk here never exploded population-wise. And then the minute the Forest Service got serious about balancing off the natural resource use problems and making some pretty tough decisions, on the ranching community, then the elk population came back. Like you have today right now.
Yeah.
Elk, viewing elk and hunting elk here is quite lucrative now.
Yeah.
A lot of elk here. And there's even antelope here now, which there were no antelope when I was here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I
Just
saw
about 30
eight
years ago
antelope yesterday.
Wow.
And there's moose here. We never had moose when I lived here.
Oh.
And there's wolverines that moved back in. And there were a couple of wolverines around when I was here.
Yeah, I just saw one the other day on the highway.
A wolverine?
Yeah.
And the wolves, of course, the stocking of the wolves down there, they're here. And there always was a deer population. And wild sheep, lots of wild sheep down the East Fork. East Fork of the Salmon River.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about the bear population? Because I know
Always
they've
lots
been
of
coming.
bear here.
Okay.
Always lots of bear.
Yeah.
Never went long without bear or cougar. We had a lot of cougar. And they were feeding on deer mostly.
Oh. Well, and I've been told that you did receive a Idaho Wildlife Conservation Award.
Yeah, I won.
And who was that?
Yeah, in 1988, I was given the Idaho Wildlife Federation Conservationist, a Wildlife Conservationist of the Year Award.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that was for your efforts in preserving Idaho's wildlife?
But it was tied to the Chinook salmon on the Nez Perce National Forest, not here.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting about that. And I have to go back to, because this is how we met, with the smoke jumping crew.
Yeah.
We were renovating, well, we putting up a whole new fence.
Right.
To protect the Dock Day homestead out in Stanley Basin. And so I'm assuming you're part of the National Smoke Jumpers Association. You helped get those guys out here and help do that work for food.
I was on the National Smoke Jumper Association Board of Directors.
Oh, okay.
And,
I didn't know that.
and we started this summer program to get old retired smoke jumpers together for kind of a mini reunion.
Yeah.
And we put out 192 smoke jumpers last summer.
Wow.
All over Idaho and Montana.
Yeah, when did you start doing that? When did they first start coming out?
We started this, we're into our 6th year now.
Wow. Because I've never seen that kind of work that fast, you know?
Well, you're talking about a lot of men who even though the average age was 70.8.
Yeah.
Well, most all of those guys grew up with a work ethic that's tough to find today amongst young people. You don't find people going through a series of jobs where you develop a work ethic that has an end result.
Yeah.
A lot of young people today are changing jobs about as fast as they can type.
Yeah, don't really know what they want or what they're looking for, what they're,
And our world has changed. We're no longer a manual labor world. We're a service industry world here in America. We have all kinds of computers and stuff, iPods, and
And you lose so much connection.
Yeah.
You can see how people keep switching jobs so much when they don't have that attachment to the job. Well, and with smoke jumping, at least the crew that I met, really wild bunch of guys.
Well,
it was
they
a lot
are.
of fun,
They are.
And that camaraderie amongst them, it was just, I mean, these guys have known each other since the early 20s. They're in their early 20s, and back then they were saying that you really did smoke jumping just as a summer job, because most of them were in college at the time when they began.
It was mostly seasonal work. It was not a career.
Yeah.
There are career smoke jumpers, who work with the kids that come in each year. Mm-hmm. But the majority of your smoke jumpers are seasonal people. Had a big base. McCall had a big base. There was one in Redding, California, Winthrop, Washington, and Redmond, Oregon, and Cave Junction, West Yellowstone, Anchorage, Alaska, Fairbanks, Alaska, Silver City, New Mexico. Those were the smoke jumper bases in my era. And of course, there's probably only about 3 or 4 of those left now.
And you jumped the whole year of 61?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. And that was, you were drawn to it just by the thrills and how, I just think that's it's a risky job, but everyone seems to love it, and that they want it.
It is risky. Your life is on the line a lot of times.
Yeah.
there are some pretty nasty injuries, but you're well trained, you know, and you have a good esprit de corps, and everybody believes in teamwork.
Yeah.
And every effort is a group effort, not an individual effort. So you stay pretty safe that way.
Yeah. Oh, and I was just curious, you had mentioned about being drafted into the Army.
Yeah.
This was during the Vietnam War.
So, well, it was the start of Laos.
Okay.
Vietnam started with Laos. Then it became Vietnam.
And so, where were you? Were you stationed at?
I was in the 39th Battle Group of the 9th Infantry Division, and we were sent to Laos to do police work, not fight work, but to work with keeping law and order in different places. And something happened politically. Half of us got there and half of us were still on our way. And they sent us all back to the United States and retrained us and disbanded us. And we all got new assignments inside the United States boundary somewhere. I went to work, eventually I went to work in the 5th Army headquarters in Chicago. It was, you know, a political thing.
Yeah. How old were you?
I was 24.
And were you still in school though? You're still at college in
Well, in
Montana?
those days, if you were a male,
yeah.
you were given 4 years of college without going into the Army. And if you used up your 4 years, whether you got a degree or not, didn't matter. But if
you're still drafted?
You got drafted.
Okay.
Yeah, automatically.
Yeah.
Except if you there were some rules, like if you were married and had a child, they didn't draft you. They
Right.
took the guys that weren't married, but who had already used up their 4-year deferment.
Yeah.
Or educational deferment, yeah.
And your eyesight, that didn't play any part in you being
Well, it did
accepted.
later on.
Okay.
Yeah, I lied about my eyes to stay in the infantry because I was a rifle soldier. And they finally caught up with me because we were going to be trained for parachuting, Army parachuting, paratrooper. And I couldn't pass the eye exam. So they moved me.
How'd you feel about that?
Yeah, well, it really upset me.
That's it.
But, you know, what can I do about it?
Yeah, because so many people that you were with, they went on, and I think...
Yeah, well, yeah, some of them got killed.
Yeah,
you know, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But that was just, you know, maybe that was meant to be, who knows?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you have many more stories and many more things you've been involved in. You know,
all right, we'll have to do this again.
Yeah, I know, because I think that's as much as people, you know, the rumors about Tom Kovalicky around Stanley.
Oh yeah.
What I've gathered this summer.
Well, those are other stories.
Yeah.
Those are the non-professional stories.
Yeah, those are off the record. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, one person you ought to get to talk to about Forest Service life here is Dave Kimpton.
Oh,
he was
Kimpton,
my Assistant Ranger
okay.
when I was here.
Yeah.
And he's living up Iron Creek. And
yeah.
He'd be a good interview.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'll have to ask him. Well, I have just a couple more, just one more week here about, but...
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Going back to college?
Yeah, my last year, but I hope, you know, next summer that if I am back in Boise and in the area, that maybe I can at least have more time to prepare for such interviews, you know, and talk with Dave and...
Are you, are you majoring in college in this kind of stuff?
In anthropology?
Yeah.
With a cultural and environmental emphasis. So, this was just right up my alley. I mean, I can't imagine finishing college without having the experiences that I got this summer.
Yeah.
So,
I'm glad it came together for you.
Oh yeah, it was.
Because I hosted when I was ranger here. I hosted the ISU anthropology department.
Oh, were they doing archaeological work?
Yeah, we did the dancing cat excavation.
Oh, okay.
You know about that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I read about this.
Yeah,
I report on it.
I worked with the professor. I can't remember his name now. He was different. He was crazy.
Oh, good luck.
But we had a large camp set up for the kids like you, who came and worked and did all the sifting and the digging and everything. We had a big camp for you guys over by Redfish Lake.
Oh. Yeah, and that was with ISU.
It was ISU.
Yeah, because I think I'm going to go back and talk to the anthropology program at BSU. They have their field school, which all the archaeological students have to go through, and this area here is, I mean, we're just right on top of the area that Native Americans migrated through. That they were migrating through in the summertime.
Oh, the Indians?
Yeah. I think they believe it's a part of the Shoshone-Bannock tribe.
Yeah, had to be.
Yeah. And so I just think there are definitely a lot of digs that could be around this area.
You probably, you know where I find chips all the time? You know the Nip and Tuck Road?
Yeah.
I run my dog out there in the evening in the spring.
Yeah.
You know, in the spring the roads are always kind of soft and the frost is heaving everything.
Yeah.
I very seldom walk that road that I don't find a big chunk of
like a spearhead
where they do the napping.
Oh, right, yeah.
You know, I found a couple of broken points out there, but I mostly find the debris.
Yeah.
From what they were probably making a spearhead out of and threw the rock away, you know.
Do you know about much of the history about the migration of the Shoshone-Bannock in this area? Yeah, because there's a book, but now they called it the Middle Fork and the Sheep Eaters War. So they
read that book.
Yeah, they had some information on that. Yeah.
I've always been interested in the Indian culture. And I read that book here in this house.
Oh, really? Yeah.
There was a woman who I met whose folks owned the Flying Bee Ranch down on the Middle Fork River. And
do you remember her name?
Pardon?
Do you remember her name?
Yeah, I know her name, and it's not coming to me right now.
Oh, okay.
But I have it written down in the book, because she gave me the book.
Oh.
Her family was very interested in the sheep eaters. And so she said, you need to read this book. And she dropped one off here one day, and I said, okay. And I never gave it back to her because she wanted me to keep it. So I read it. It was just fascinating.
I know. Like they including it on all the journal entries.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just, how they're supposedly supposed to be tracking down these Indian warriors that were just ravaging all the mining towns. I mean, and it ended up just being women and children, just a small group. And it's just, that kind of, do you think it was used as a propaganda? So those kinds of reports could encourage
that they did the same thing to the Nez Perce Indians. They reduced the size of their original reservation by half in order to grab the good half for farming. And what they did was they contrived attacks by the Indians on white settlers, and then the government got all excited and came out here, and that's what started the War of 1877 with the Nez Perce flight to Canada. And that was just a sad thing about how they got treated for the wrong reason.
Right. I know. And they do. Well, I guess Chief Joseph is the symbol of the Nez Perce, the history of the Nez Perce in the West.
Well, he's an icon, for Indians, but the Indians have their own internal viewpoint, and there's a group of Nez Perce people who don't consider themselves to be loyal to Chief Joseph. They're a band of Nez Perces that live up in the northern part of Washington State, and they don't consider themselves as part of the treaty Indians. There's the treaty Indians and the non-treaty Indians. And non-treaty Indians are still pissed off at Chief Joseph for, losing the war.
Oh, yeah.
For signing the treaty.
Right.
But that's Indian politics.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just really interesting. And have you noticed if the language is being preserved? That's something that...
The Nez Perce language?
Yeah.
They're doing a good job of preserving it. They have classes at the LCSC.
Oh.
You can take a class in Nez Perce language, and then the kids are now getting it on the reservation.
Oh, that's important.
Yeah.
Because it'll just be lost, It's happening in a lot of reservations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
Look more into the Nez Perce.
Yeah.
But display on, maybe just the sheep eaters or doing some more research on that and having this display in the museum on that would be really good, I think. Because it was the Pioneer Museum, but now that there's some new management in the SIHA, I think they're trying to expand it to include, more interpretation, like you said, of the salmon, so the ecology in the area, and include a lot more.
Well, this has got a great potential.
Oh, yeah.
If they can get good leadership.
Yeah.
And a good source of funds,
Yeah.
People like you coming here to do internships that would leave tracks for other people to follow. Would be a cool thing.
Yeah. That's what they need. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun for you. They're what we're going to tell you. The Nez Perces to this day don't want anything to do with Shoshone-Bannock, and the Shoshone-Bannock don't want anything to do with Nez Perce. And
what does that go back to?
Well, it's over the boundary for killing salmon.
Oh.
If Nez Perce people try to come over here and get salmon, and the Shoshone-Bannock find out about it, they'll probably come over and kill them.
Wow.
I saw a lot of fights here when I was ranger here.
Really?
And likewise, if a Shoshone-Bannock tries to go over that line to get a salmon where the Nez Perce people live, he is risking his life. They just don't tolerate each other.
Yeah.
They've always warred over where that line was for salmon. It's basically the South Fork of the Salmon River.
And that's where that boundary is
all the Nez Perces
understood.
stay away from the South Fork, and the Shoshone-Bannock don't go any further than that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the Nez Perce, they cover mostly across northern of Stanley, and into Montana and some of Oregon and Washington. Yeah. Okay.
Well, congratulations on your summer. I hope
thank you.
I hope it goes good for you.
Yeah. Well, it was really nice having you talk about. Well, I'm sure you have a lot more knowledge in other areas, but it's been really.
I could talk
really
for
good.
days.
Yeah.
Hi, that he'll pass it on here. Bill James.
And I've
He lives in the Shallows.
Okay, because we actually have some of the daily logs.
Yeah, well,
that were left
Bill's
here.
got a lot of stuff that he very wisely saved, because the Forest Service didn't have any historical people. They just threw these things away. So Bill James would take that stuff home. That's somebody that this society here should talk to Bill a lot more than they are.
Yeah.
He's got
I'll have to let them know, because I've seen his name, like I said, in those logs and diaries, but
he's got a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I'll definitely have to check out that closet space, because who knows what kind of treasures are in there.
Yeah, who knows what's in there.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah, I just wish we could have talked at the beginning of the summer.
Look, you have a good school year.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much, Tom.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Yeah.
You want some chips for the road?
No.
Okay.
You want
Yeah.
another bottle?
Yeah, I just don't know how I can hold it. Thank you. Send me off.
Hey, stay in touch.
I will.
I hope we see you next summer.
Yeah, I'll be coming up and visiting.
We'll stop in the store.
I will.
I'll be there with James.
Okay. Good. Bye.
We're interviewing Tom Kovalicky, and Tom has been in the Stanley area for many years, and Tom, we'd love to hear more about it from you.
Okay, do you have a particular place and time you want to start?
Yes, how about if we start at the very beginning?
Okay.
Where and when were you born, and then what brought you to Stanley?
Okay, I was born in September 13th, which was a Friday, in 1935, in a town called Passaic, New Jersey. And I left there when I was 17 years old. I spent 5 days on a train going to Missoula, Montana to start forestry school.
What made you interested in forestry school coming from New Jersey?
Well, I had an experience in life that kind of put things in focus for me. When I was 11, going on 12, I came down with polio. And it was a type of polio that they called bulbar, and it was the type that hit your lungs and some of your muscle groups, but mostly your lungs. And I remember them taking me out of my house and putting me in an isolation hospital, and there were lots of kids there, and they were all dying, or a lot of them were dying. And so my family dentist showed up one day, and I think it might have been like more of a gesture of saying goodbye than it was saying hello. And I kind of sensed that. And before he left, he dropped the book on my lap and said, "This will help you pass some time." And it was a book written by Zane Grey called The Young Forester. Well, I read that book. And I said to myself, what a great lifestyle this must be to be a forester working out in the wild. Of course, it was a romantic novel. It wasn't a practical novel, as I found out later on. But the novel impressed me so much about what a great lifestyle healthy people could have fighting wildfires and poachers and outlaws and timber thieves in the West. And I said, if I ever get out of this hospital, that's what I'm going to do.
That's great.
And that's what prompted me to go to college. Otherwise, I probably never would have been motivated to try college, because where I was living, we just didn't have that kind of encouragement. It was get a job out of high school or go in the military or whatever. And I'm the first one in my family to ever go to college, on both sides. So it was kind of a big step forward for me. And that's how I got to Missoula.
So then what took you from Missoula to Stanley?
Well, it was a Forest Service career. I got there in a pretty circuitous route. I started college in 1953, and I enjoyed living in Montana so much, because Montana was one of my dream geographies, that I managed to smash 4 years of college into an 8-year program. And as a result of that, in those days, if you didn't get your degree in 4 days, they drafted you in the Army.
Whoa.
So I got drafted in my senior year, because I was already in my 5th year. It was my 5th year, I was a senior. I had already used up my 4-year deferment. I couldn't get another deferment, so I went in the Army at age 24. So I served 2 years in the 9th Infantry Division, and we were originally drafted for the Laotian conflict, which preceded the Vietnam conflict. And it was a whole different scenario. It was more of a police action type thing than it was an open warfare. Somewhere along the way they changed their mind. Eisenhower was the president. They changed their mind, and everybody came back and got retrained, and we went on with our other Army career until I got discharged, which was 2 years down the road. I only had served 2 years. So I then went back to college, which would have been 1960, and started smoke jumping. And that delayed everything another couple of years. So I finally got everything together, got out of college in 1961, and I was on my way to Laos to drop cargo for Air America when I got a offer from the Forest Service to start a professional career.
Wow.
Because by then I had my degree. And I got to looking at my age factor and the fact that I was almost 30 years old and still never had a job. So I canceled out on the Air America phase of my career and took my first professional job with the Forest Service in Pinedale, Wyoming.
Oh.
And started my career there as what they call a junior forester. And I spent from 62 until 65 in Pinedale, working on the Bridger National Forest. And then I was asked to take a job in Rock Springs, Wyoming with the Forest Service, the Bridger National Forest again. And ironically, it was called the Jim Bridger Ranger District. And the reason is that they started a brand new office in that town in order to prevent the Park Service from getting popular local support to have the Flaming Gorge National Recreation Area given to them by Congress to manage instead of the Forest Service. For some reason, to this day, I can't understand why the Forest Service wanted to be the managers of Flaming Gorge, but they got their wish. So I stayed in Rock Springs, and I had a gorgeous ranger district, the west slope of the Wind River Mountains. I had a huge chunk of the Bridger Wilderness.
Wow.
Lots of cows, lots of sheep, lots of elk, deer, antelope, bighorn sheep, 1,000 lakes. Almost all of them had fish in them. Gorgeous part of the world. And of course, by then I was married and I had 2 children by then. So I stayed there, and then I got an offer from the Forest Service to come to Stanley, Idaho.
And what year was that?
That would have been 1970. So in 1969, I was divorced. So I was able to take this job without any turmoil with family choices.
Sure.
And I came up here, and you got to remember in those days, you didn't apply for jobs inside the Forest Service. They were given to you.
Oh.
And they would say, we want you to go here, or we want you to go there. And of course, you could talk it over with your family, and if it didn't fit, they would make adjustments. But generally, they expect you to go where they sent you.
Were you familiar with Stanley at that point, and were you excited?
No,
or?
I had never been to Stanley. But in doing some searching about what was here, in fact, one of the guys that I started my career with, Jay Seavey, was in Wyoming with me, and he grew up in this country. So I asked him what this country was like, and he said, you will like it. So, I knew I was kind of wired into some, beautiful country.
And you didn't know Bob Seavey at that point?
Didn't know Bob Seavey at that point.
And you didn't know Joe Leonard?
Didn't know Joe Leonard. Correct. In fact, I didn't know anybody here.
Wow.
And so I accepted the job, and I arrived here, it was May of 1970, when I drove in through Lower Stanley, looking at the Sawtooth Mountains for the first time in that gorgeous scenery where you turn the corner in Lower Stanley, and all of a sudden there in Upper Stanley is the mountains, and it was May with all the snow. And I had just come from the Wind River Range, which was enormous. And I thought that they were the most gorgeous place on earth. You had the Wind Rivers, you had the Grand Tetons, you had the Paposia area, and I said, you can't beat this. And here I turned the corner, and I saw what I saw. I said, oh my God, this is awesome. And you had the Salmon River running by, And of course the ranger station was at the base of the town of Stanley, and well, between Lower Stanley and Stanley. And so I was able to drive right to my house that the government was going to provide for me, which is now the museum for the Sawtooth Interpretive Historical Association.
And was that house at the same location the museum is at now,
Yes, it
or
is.
was it somewhere else?
No,
and
it was
moved?
someplace. And before I forget, I was the last ranger to live in that house.
Really?
Yeah. So my welcoming was the Sawtooth Peaks with all the snow on it and the Salmon River. It was a gorgeous day. Absolutely gorgeous day when I arrived there. And it stayed gorgeous until about the 1st of June. And we had a picnic on the flat where the employee housing would be for the Harrah Corporation right now. That was a flat that was both a mixture of private land and Forest Service land. In fact, we used to pasture our horses there. And the town Chamber of Commerce had a picnic on Memorial Day weekend. And they invited me to come down for that. And if I remember correctly, it was nearly 90, or approaching 90 degrees that day. And we were having this town picnic and playing horseshoes, and that's how I got to meet a lot of the locals almost instantly. Where my house was then is also where my office was. That's what the Interpretive Association is using for office space now. That was my Forest Service office.
So it's the building behind the museum,
Yeah,
basically.
right. That was where we had our office, and then we were starting in the process of building the new office. That's the one that everybody's familiar with today, about a mile out of town up on the bench.
Right, right.
In fact, I built that office. So that's how I got to Stanley, and that's how I was welcomed here with beautiful weather, great scenery, real friendly people, and then started my career here.
And what were your responsibilities? What were you brought here to do?
Well, a couple of things. One was they wanted somebody who had experience with grazing, and somebody who had experience with wildlife. And since my degree was both forestry and wildlife habitat management, with also a minor in range management, I kind of fit that bill. And my ranger district was quite a bit different than what you would know today. The Stanley Ranger District stopped at the edge of Sawtooth Lake and went all the way over to the divide between Grand Jean and Stanley. And then from the divide from Grand Jean, it went all the way down to what we call Boundary Creek and Dagger Falls. But it was always on the let's see, that would be the east side of the Salmon River, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it would follow the Salmon River. The middle of the river was the boundary all the way down to a place called Red Side Rapids, and then up over the top of the mountains back up to Sunbeam, and then Sunbeam over to the edge of the White Clouds, and then back over to Redfish Lake.
It's a huge
It
territory.
was a huge ranger district, probably in the neighborhood of 1 million plus acres.
Wow. How many other rangers were there helping you with this?
Well, I was the only ranger here. I was the ranger is kind of the boss or the CEO, and then I had a staff.
How many staff?
I didn't have a big staff then. I had a secretary, Jeline Steele. I had a what we called a general district assistant, Bill James, who was a local boy from Chavez. And I had a forester, Bruce Kaufman, and I had a range assistant, Dave Kimpton.
And were they here when you got here, or
No.
you hired them individually as you met them?
I hired Bruce Kaufman when I got here, and I hired Dave Kimpton when I got here. The James boy and Oh, and Nell Sanderson, who was my in those days we called him the fire control officer, he was here, along with Jolene Steele and Bill James and myself. And then, but I had a huge summer crew that came to work for us to do the different jobs like trail crews and backcountry wilderness. In fact, John Rember, who was one of my wilderness rangers in those days. And let's see, we had a helicopter crew here. I had my own helicopter here for 2 years. And that was a big advantage for not only fighting fire, but doing other jobs, you know. Mm-hmm. So that was the makeup, and then they broke the news that they were going to build a new office in Stanley to upgrade us to get ready for the potential Sawtooth National Recreation Area if it passed. And of course it did pass.
So, and what year was that?
That would have been 62.
Okay.
So we built the new office. Did I say 62? I'm sorry. 1972. Mm-hmm. We built a new office in 1971. And when we moved into it, we were still the Stanley Ranger District. And about halfway through the year, the legislation passed that September. And so we were then part of the Sawtooth National Recreation Area, which basically did away with 5 ranger districts and 3 national forests, or parts of them, because the new boundaries overlap. That'd be a better way to say it. The new boundaries overlap portions of 3 national forests and 5 ranger districts. So they had to be reconfigured. And as a result of that move, we grew enormously in job responsibility, budgets, and staffing. I was then moved to Ketchum, Idaho, where I became part of the Sawtooth National Recreation Area hierarchy. And that would have been 73 when I got to Ketchum. And I was then given the title of Assistant Superintendent for Administration, meaning, I guess in a common term, a super ranger for the entire area with 3 assistants. One was Dave Lee, one was Dave Kimpton, and the other one was Jerry Green. And we broke the SNRA up into 3 units, a lot different than it is today. One was called the Stanley Unit, one was called the Wood River or Haley Unit, and the other one was called the Wilderness Unit. And the Wilderness Unit had their headquarters in 4th of July Creek, mm-hmm. which was one of the ranger districts that was broken up, just like Stanley District was broken up. Those rangers didn't exist anymore. The other unit was kept in Haley, which was then called the Wood River Ranger District, but we kept the office in Haley. But he had duties inside the area here. So that was the new organization, along with a complete staff of planners. We had a forest planner who did planning for the entire unit, and that was Lynn Sprague, who was the ranger at 4th of July Creek when the SNRA come along. We had a full-time minerals director. They were called directors. We had a full-time landscape architect and recreation planner. That was Norm Malone. Harry Young was the minerals director. And I had a full-time law enforcement director. His name was Cecil Wilson. Had a secretary. Her name was Sandra Brown. And I had a big staff there in the office, including a wildlife biologist, a fish biologist, which was Greg Munther, and a part-time archaeologist, Art Sellon, out of the Twin Falls office. So we had a big new organization, and money was not a problem. We had a lot of money, and we had a lot of energy to get things moving towards doing what the Act asked us to do. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's too lengthy to get into, but that's easily available to find out what those jobs are. Basically, we were to keep the anadromous steelhead and chinook habitat intact, which was then in conflict with timber cutting, road building, mining, and grazing activities. That was one of our bigger assignments, was to get a handle on that sort of stuff. So, the one man I left out of the equation was Gray Reynolds, who was called the superintendent of the Sawtooth SNRA. He indeed was the key figure, the key administrator. I was his day-to-day administrator, and the other people were his specialists. So that's how we were organized. And the new office became the headquarters for the Stanley Zone, and we closed everything down where the museum is. The reason we closed that house down was that when they plumbed it years ago, the septic system was in the floodplain and it flushed right into the Salmon River, which was not a cool thing. And so when I told my boss about that, I said, I'm not going to allow anybody to live there because of the pollution. And didn't have any problem with that. So we closed that ranger station down, including the house. And then years later, years later, they hooked it up to the Sur Lagoon system to make it more, compatible with the environment. So that's the story on how the Sawtooth SNRA got started.
Well, didn't you also, when you were, when the ranger station, when the house was in use, didn't you have problems with hippies there? And wasn't there hot springs or something?
Yeah, right in the backyard of the ranger station was a beautiful natural hot springs swimming pool put in by the CCC boys with a log cabin dressing room.
And the CCC boys are?
The Civilian Conservation Corps from the 1930s, President Roosevelt's Depression team. It was gorgeous. It was cement and tile lined. Had beautiful hot water. Sat and looked right at the Sawtooth Mountain. You could sit there in the daytime or in the evening on a moonlight night and see the entire panorama. It was just gorgeous.
How big was it?
It was probably, I'm going to say it's probably about 16 feet long and probably about 10 or 12 feet wide.
Oh, big.
It was pretty
Swimming
big.
pool.
Yeah. And what happened was that over the years, when the valley had a small population, locals and Forest Service people alike used it. And there were no restrictions because everybody kind of did their own policing thing. And then in the late 60s, early 70s, Stanley got discovered by what we call the hippies, the hippie crowd. Whatever that is, you're not sure. But people would come and camp out in Stanley Basin all summer. They were looking at this as an escape because there was no law here. And the Forest Service was the only people who wore badges in those days. And
there was no sheriff or?
There was a sheriff, but we very seldom saw him. We saw state police once in a while during the holidays, and that was about it. But there was no town cop or assistant sheriff or any of that stuff. What happened to the hot tub was that the locals, a lot of them didn't have, they say, hot water in their houses. Sometimes I wonder about that, but if that was the case, so be it. They would come down and they would either use the Forest Service bathhouse for their Saturday night cleanup, or they would use what we refer to the snake pit, which has now got a building around it and is controlled by the Harrah Corporation and the motel unit up there. But you can imagine the problem with that many people using that pool, and then getting into the drugs and getting into the pollution with soap and human waste and other paraphernalia laying around, partying in there probably 20 hours a day. It got to be a real headache for all of us, especially me. And what brought the thing to a crescendo was a bunch of them were drunk and on drugs in the middle of the day at noon, standing naked on the roof of the bathing or the hut to change your clothes in, when one of the county commissioners' wives drove by and they mooned her. Well, she drove to Chalice at 1,000 miles an hour, got a hold of the forest supervisor, whose name was Wes Carlson, and told him the story. So he called me up and he said, "What are we going to do about it?" And I said, "Well, this might be the perfect reason to shut it down." I said, "It's a shame we have to do this, or we'd have to get into a gating, fencing, charging system." So what I arranged for was we very quietly took the bathing house down. It was in kind of an erotic log condition anyhow. Took it down and people didn't say anything. And we carted off all of the debris. And then I arranged with the highway department to come in late at night with dump trucks of pea gravel and fill the pool with pea gravel. And I did that purposely so that I didn't bring a bulldozer or anything like that, so that at some point in time, if they wanted to excavate it for archaeological purposes, it would be gravel, not dirt and rocks. And to this day, you can see the steam and the hot water, bubbling out of the ground there. So that's how we solved that dilemma. And of course, everybody in town went berserk about the federal government, ruining their lifestyle. Well, we probably did, but it had to be done in order to preserve some form of semblance, because I wasn't getting much sleep, because I was sleeping then there. I was still in that house, when we did this. So it got to be, a little bit of a headache. But that's the story on the hot tub. And you got to remember, in those days, Stanley only had 39 people who wintered here.
Oh.
That's what the sign said on the entrance coming into town, population 39. In the summertime, we probably had, I would say, under 1,000 people who came here to work and play and open up businesses. Like, this was the headwaters for the outfitting industry to not only float the main Salmon River, but the Middle Fork River. So there was a lot of activity here with young people. And there were 3 bars. Every one of them had live music, and every one of them drank every legal hour they could, and then some. And we had restaurants here. We had a restaurant in the Casino Club. We had a restaurant in the Stanley Club, which was a log cabin bar, which was right across the street from the post office, which burned down. And we had the Rod and Gun Club. And then we had a little bar out on the highway called Howdyville, which is now called Elk Mountain. And that bar would be going. We had some... No, we didn't. No, in those days we did not have a bar in Lower Stanley. There had been bars there in the past, but there wasn't any when I was here. So this town was a party town. There was no fire department. There was no ambulance crew, or EMTs, what they called them then. There was no law, except for the Forest Service.
Did you have to try and enforce any of the law, or did you just party with the rest of them, or
well,
how did you engage?
If there was a need to do something in order to hang on to a situation until the sheriff got up here, we did that. We did all the search and rescue work. We did all the ambulance runs in the back of my private station wagon, because the Forest Service did not have anything here to take victims to Sun Valley with, and we had a lot of victims. The cops would come up here over the busy weekends and the big holidays, because drugs were a big deal up here then. Alcohol was a big deal, and the Stanley Stomp came into focus in those early 70s. and especially when Joe Leonard and his crew got everything started. You know, I mean, when Stanley, a town of 39, makes the front cover of National Geographic magazine with local people dancing on the tables in the bars, you know you hit the big money, the big time. This town was very exciting, very colorful. Fist fights constantly. Lots of guns being carried.
Were there gunfights in the streets?
Well, I'm not aware of any gunfights in the streets, but there were a lot of guns being shot up in the air, you know, not at people, but up in the air, especially over the holiday season, because there was nobody here to stop it.
Yeah.
I remember quite vividly Bruce Kaufman, who was my timber forester, being attacked by a holdup man in the middle of Stanley at roughly about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And the robber was thwarted by his wife, who was coming out of the post office and hit the robber with her purse. And the guy got so excited he ran off. But that was just a mere crack in what was really happening here, because with live music going almost every night of the week, there was a lot of reason to come here dancing. And when the bands weren't here, the jukeboxes were going, you know, early in the morning until who knows when. But the ambulance thing was very interesting, because we in the Forest Service were required to have first aid training. So us, along with some of the locals who had first aid training, unofficially would pick up a victim, put him in the back of my station wagon, and take him to Sun Valley, because that was the nearest hospital. The old hospital right there on the Sun Valley resort ground. And then other people would do the same thing. There were other people taking victims with their private cars, or with the generosity of their soul saying, hey, here's somebody laying here, let's get them, you know, to Sun Valley. That's when Marie come along.
Marie Osborne.
Marie Osborne came along and organized her first effort. And there was no clinic here, but she organized us into taking the first 81-hour courses offered. You had to take 81 hours of training to get the EMT qualification. And I remember Bruce Kaufman was in that class, and Dave Kimpton, and myself, and Bill James, and some other local people. And I think there was no more than 6 or 7 of us who ran what Marie then got for us was a World War II Pontiac ambulance that no one was using at the Mountain Home Air Force Base. And we kept it up at the new ranger station. And when the call came in, and it usually came into my home or Marie's home, and then Marie would immediately round up people, no matter what time of the day it was, to take the ambulance to where the accident was, and then take the victims over the hill to Sun Valley. And we did that for, probably from 1971 and a half until the first ambulance, the new ambulance was bought, and the clinic was bought, whatever year that was. Had to be after 1976 sometime, 77, 78, somewhere in there. So that was the ambulance EMT story here. Other than that, people kind of took care of themselves here. If there was a baby due, there were women around who knew what to do if that was needed. John Rember's mom, Betty, was a registered nurse. So, and there were other women in the valley who had hands-on experience with, trauma. So, we kind of took care of ourselves in those days. Didn't have to worry about knife wounds or gunshot wounds. I think those came afterwards, but not while I was here.
And who are some of your most memorable characters that you spent time with? Can you think, are there any adventures or characters that really stand out in your mind as being...
the whole damn town. If you were looking for characters, you'd have to put a badge on every one of them. because we had people like Casanova Jack, who ran the music and owned the bar, what was now called it was always called the Rod and Gun, but the locals always named it the God and Run Club. And he was a rock and roll guy with kind of an Elvis Presley cowboy demeanor, and he dressed the role. And his girlfriend was named Tall Mary because she was 6'5", 6'4", something like that. And that bar was unreal. They played fast music and cowboy music. He was a character that you won't find anywhere except in a novel. And Wayne Willard, who ran the Stanley Club, was a character like you wouldn't believe. He could have easily been in a movie. And then you had the folks who ran the Sawtooth Hotel, the Cole family. And if that wasn't a pair to draw to, the older couple who ran that hotel, I don't know who would be. And then you had members of that family coming and going who were characters, including Bob Cole, who was an old-time cowboy and outfitter who eventually went to work for Bill Harrah, along with a guy by the name of Denny. His wife Lucille was the postmaster. She was a character. Albert, her husband, Denny, was a character like you wouldn't believe. I mean, this town was salted with these people. And then you had Bill Wall, who lived right across the street from the casino club, who drank a bottle of whiskey every day. Now, if that wasn't a character, I don't know what was. And we many a time would have to just open up the door and drag him across the street and throw him into bed, because that was his house right across the street there. You had people like Starvin' Marvin, who was a logger, who would turn his truck upside down on the snow at Grand Jean and then pull it with a caterpillar up and over the top of the summit on top of the snow, so that he'd be here early to go logging, and then flip the truck over to the other side so that it would be ready to run again. You had the Crane guys, Earl Crane, who was a small-time logger who stood about 6'5", probably weighed 230 pounds, tougher than rawhide, who hung out in this town and was eager to fight anybody who wanted to be fought. And then we had Dan Woolley, who was as big as Earl Crane was, and was a cowman out of the East Fork country, who had the cabin that his father had as the ranch across the river from Lower Stanley. That was their summer ground. And then you had the Pivas, who came up and ran their cows. They were Chalice people who had summer pasture up here. And then you had all the Shiver family. Then you had the Okamikas, who were cow and sheep people. And then you had the Busterback people. You had the Sandy people coming up out of Hagerman. This went on and on. I mean, any given night, any given day, you had characters here.
Did they all pretty much get along, or were there different factions and different groups, and or did everyone just sort of party together? I
would say that when it came party time, everybody was buddies. There might be differences with the Forest Service between 8 and 5, but after 5 o'clock in the evening, generally everybody was on the same page. If they were partying and dancing, you might be dancing with some cowboy's wife, cowman's, big rancher's wife, and they just thought you were okay. Next morning they'd be in your office telling you what an asshole you were. But we had lots of barbecues, we had lots of festivals, the town was totally unorganized. The only semblance of organization was the Chamber of Commerce. The mayor's office was, that was defunct. Their biggest concern was the fear that the Sawtooth National Recreation Area was a communist organization and it was going to ruin their lifestyle. That was their big fear. We had ranchers up and down the valley like the Williams family, who you could tell stories about their beginnings from day one. You have the Rember family, more stories. They had a couple of old forest rangers who retired here that could tell stories like you wouldn't believe. I mean, this was a place to write a novel, and in fact, there were three books written that I'm aware of about the area, novels. One was Appaloosa Rising, and the other one was Trout Fishing in America by Brodigan.
Right.
And the third novel escapes me right now, but your question about characters, boy, we had them. We had them, including people like Joe Leonard and Dave Kinton,
Right.
who would make anybody's history book.
And Tom Kovalicky.
Yeah, right.
You mentioned as one of your responsibilities the fish. And can you tell me more about the fishing days then and in comparison to now, and also the animals, the elk and the deer and so forth?
Well, starting with the elk, when I got here, I didn't think there were hardly any elk here, because I came from parts of Montana and Wyoming where the word elk meant something. And I had, like, on my ranger district in Wyoming, I had 5,000 elk. Wow. And we knew that from surveys. I didn't make that up. I got here, and I, after my first summer of moving around, hardly saw any elk or any elk sign. And I hardly saw any deer or deer sign. I didn't see any large groups of deer until I got down on the middle fork of the Salmon River. And then I saw lots of elk and I saw lots of deer. But up here in the basin, I hardly saw anything that I could get excited about in terms of, okay, I can hardly wait for elk season to start.
Right.
Some of the locals who knew the habits of the local elk and local deer were always quite successful, but they as a rule were in the minority. And in those days they had what they called the hunter's ball, which was a huge 3-day drunk in downtown Stanley. They would start off the night before the opening day, and people would drink and fall over by the hundreds, and you wondered how they ever got to get up and go hunting. But I don't remember a lot of successful people coming into town. And I'm sure there were. I know the outfitters who generally, again, were over against the East Fork country, not the East Fork, well, yeah, the East Fork of the Salmon River, sure, and also the Middle Fork. Those folks did fairly good, I would say. I shot several deer, and while I lived here, and I only saw one elk that I could have shot had I wanted to kill that elk. I could have killed that elk. That was out of 3 years of hunting while I lived here. I don't call that, great hunting. But after I left and we made certain adjustments in cattle and sheep grazing, talking to some of the people that lived here then, elk numbers jumped up considerably, and I think I know why now. That's because the sheep numbers and the cattle numbers were being grazed at too many animal unit months in the summertime, leaving nothing for the elk to reach for the wintertime. So they slowly and finally moved out of here. I think if you go back before my time, you might have found out that there might have been more elk and deer here before the ranges got loaded up with too many cows and too many sheep. It makes sense, and you find that trend no matter where you go on public lands. The salmon, when I got here, my first summer here, I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the Chinook salmon running up Valley Creek by the hundredth and running up the main Salmon River going up toward Decker Flat. in the hundreds. In fact, we had a season, let's see, I fished for them in 70, 71, 72, 73, that I clearly remember fishing for them legally with the season. And after that, I think 77 might have been the last year they fished for Chinook here legally. And the reason was is that the large dams on the lower Snake River were starting to kick in, and they were killing more fish than they were allowing to survive going down into the ocean and coming back from the ocean. So yeah, I saw the decline here of salmon and steelhead like you wouldn't believe. And trout fishing was not that good here. Trout fishing was, for rainbows and cutthroats, was not a big event. Bull trout, yeah, there were a lot of bull trout around in those days, because they traditionally hung out with the anadromous fish, eating the eggs of the salmon and the steelhead. And they, of course, eventually got in trouble too. So, you know, there was a big change here, and one of the big culprits that we found out was irrigation practices in the upper Stanley Basin were very detrimental to spawning of steelhead and Chinooks. The ranchers in those days took a lot of water out of the headwaters, drying up the creek or drying up the main Salmon River, and then there were no head gates or screens to keep the fish from spawning in irrigation ditches, which were then left dry, and all those fish died. So you had a lot of problems here with water, irrigation, water rights, groundwater, and poaching, and the 4 rivers on the Snake River Dam, or the 4 dams on the Snake River.
With regard to your assignments with the Forest Service and the SNRA, what was your favorite assignment? What was the favorite project that you worked on? And would you do anything differently, looking back in time, would you do anything differently with any of the projects than you did?
I would do things differently. I would have acted more vigorously, and I would have gone at a much faster pace than what I was moving at. I was moving at a pretty fast pace for the jobs that we wanted to get done, but I would have accelerated that pace had I known that the people who were going to follow me would largely abandon the principles that we established for the future workers here. As typical in the Forest Service, new people following people who had a successful program generally want to reinvent the wheel, and they'll drop a lot of things off the table instead of moving forward in a straight line with programs that they inherited until they found out that those programs are no good. Generally would not even give those programs a chance and would start over again claiming that money was their problem. Well, most of the time money was not their problem. It was their idealism or it was their individual philosophies. I would have found a way to perhaps circumvent that a little longer had I been that clever enough to do that. I was naive enough to think that when you left an assignment and you left a program that was working, you left it together. It's like a windmill that brings up 80 gallons of water per minute. Why would you dismantle the windmill and bring up 40 gallons a minute? That always concerned me and confused me about the people who follow people in the Forest Service. My favorite assignment was bringing into focus the recreational values that this area has that were either being neglected or slowly being eroded by a lack of concern by both government and non-government forces. People took for granted a long time what was here, and the Sawtooth SNRA Act was really a brilliant piece of legislation designed to hang on to pieces of Idaho that will never ever change, including the very controversial aspect of buying out the rights of private landowners to not subdivide their land. That was not popular. That was not looked at as being anything except a negative reaction. By the time I left, I had spent over $20 million of public money buying up the rights of ranchers who could have turned this into subdivision mecca. In fact, one of the big chunks of money we spent was buying out a large part of the Obsidian subdivision, which would have turned this valley into a piece of crap overnight. Mm-hmm. There was already a 50, 60 or more houses out there that we bought and got rid of before anything else happened.
And they were out sort of opposite where Fisher Creek Lodge,
yeah,
the old Sessions was?
From Fisher Creek Lodge south, Fisher Creek north, all the way to the little place called Obsidian. That whole flat was being subdivided. Mostly from Pettit Lake north is where the big subdivisions were. That's where most of the houses were done. And it would just been a matter of time until they moved up towards Sawtooth City.
Yeah.
That's where the next big subdivision. We froze everything in time. We froze Fisher Creek subdivision. We froze Sawtooth City. We froze Lower Stanley, Upper Stanley, from expanding into more subdivision land. What we did was took a look at what each piece of private property had to offer for the future, and then worked with those landowners and said, look, we'll buy your subdivision rights, but you may retain one more parcel for another house. You may retain something for, say, a dude ranch. You may retain something that would be a recreation business down the road, but we want to buy the rest of your rights. We're going to give you cash. You keep the property in deed. You pay income taxes on it, or you pay property taxes on it. You may sell it, and you may give it to your heirs, but you can't subdivide it. And we'll pay you at that property value, which, if I remember right, was probably 95, 96, 97% of appraisal.
Wow.
So for the money in those days, it was a good deal. Because a lot of the ranchers up here had, at best, a summertime opportunity to graze cattle. They couldn't put up enough hay here to raise cattle or keep cattle here over the winter. In fact, traditionally they never did that. So for rancher A, landowner A, to get $1 million check in the 1970s was a big deal. Because if you put that money into an interest-bearing account, you're going to come out okay. Sure, you lost your right to subdivide, but you were also giving up a piece of your heart for the future. You were saying, yes, I believe in Idaho so much that I'm willing to keep the Sawtooth Valley a model ranching community or a model scenic part of Idaho. And it's working. I mean, that part worked. I was very proud of that we were able to do that despite all the negative talk we had about going on. And it was tenseful. It was a lot of tension going on. Not directly connected to that, but to show you how tough this valley was, I got in, I had to defend myself 4 times physically from other people.
Because of that?
Well, because of being probably a government guy, doing implementation of programs that were not popular. And that was kind of interesting and colorful because we just had that kind of a tense valley for a while. Now I notice today that tension's gone.
Yeah.
It's not here today. People have learned how to live with the the new way of life here, although I'm going to predict that the next era will be landowners who have these properties who want to revert back to the right to subdivide them. There's going to be people here who are going to try to either politically or through the court process unwind the ball of twine that created the SNRA and the private lands program. And the Forest Service today probably can't be trusted. And I hate to really put it in that term, because the Forest Service today has people in it who are looking at their careers and their political placement more than they are their resources. It shows every damn day on the horizon. And from the chief's office on down to the ranger's job, we have people who are now politically biased, politically based, and you don't know where they're going to be 10 years from today in regard to keeping this ball of twine from unwinding. I don't trust them. We're seeing a little bit of that right now with the radio tower thing, which is a real childish attempt at unwinding the SNRA in terms of private land regulation. So we'll see. You know, time will tell.
Well, Tom, I think those of us who live here and enjoy it here owe you a huge debt of gratitude for creating this place as it is,
Yeah,
as
that's
we
nice
like
to
it
hear.
today.
That's nice to hear that. Yeah,
That's true. So thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, a lot of Forest Service people will be glad to hear that. Believe me.
Well, it's true. You were very instrumental
Yeah.
in making it the place we want to be.
Sure, sure.
So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.